The New York Liberty are 11-4 and flying high. So why are people talking about them not flying as high as they should? The great Jackie Powell is here to talk all about it. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm your host, Howard Megdal, thanking you for making us your first listen every day. We keep on breaking records with you guys. Thanks to you for making sure that we are the place you go 6 days a week to listen and learn about women's basketball, past, present, and future. And of course, as you know, it is not just me. It is the incredible team over at the Nets, people like Jackie Powell, reporting as well as hosting, of course, over at Locked On Women's Basketball. Make sure you're supporting all we're doing. Go to thenexthoops.com, and for $9 a month, $72 a year, you can support all the work that's being done covering the game that we love, over 100 reported pieces every single month, thenexthoops.com. And so within that game, I'm very, very confused. I alluded to it at the top. We're here for a Liberty check-in. We're going to talk about, in segment one, some of the things that have happened so far, the newcomers, how everyone is blending in from Breanna Stewart on down. Number two, segment two, is what needs to change. But I mean, it kind of blows my mind. And Jackie, you wrote an incredible story for us over at the Nets about it, about sort of comparing the Liberty to where they ought to be, just to give our context, just to set it for our listeners. Liberty are 11-4. They're second in the league in offensive rating. Their net rating, 8.5, is comparable to a lot of teams that have won championships in the WNBA. But we're talking about the Liberty as like a failed process in some ways. Take me through, it's obviously a lot of gray area and you get into it. Where do you think we are? The Liberty, biggest debacle in women's basketball history, or supercharged engine impossible to stop? You have to pick one of the two.
Are you kidding? I mean, I think it's more. I mean, it's obviously in the middle, but I think it's more toward the latter, or we're moving toward the latter.
Yeah, that's about where I am. Yeah, I to me, and I want to do your take. I know, I mean, I'm whatever. Twitter's a binary world. It's idiotic. The idea that the Liberty are somehow a failure at this point. Number one, when they are 11-4 with a really strong overall offensive and defensive profile. They're top four in the league in defense as well. Seems crazy to me by itself, before you get into the fact that Jonathan Cole built this team to win in the playoffs. This isn't about setting some record, beating Sandy Brondello's 2014 Mercury, going 29-5 in the regular season. It's about winning a championship. That's what anyone and everyone there will tell you. That said, and you talked about it, there were some seams showing, I guess is the way to put it, when it came to their recent work against some of the best teams in the league. Take me through what I guess is the top line of what you feel you learned about the newcomers during this most recent run, which included their first game against the Las Vegas Aces.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I learned, so when you say the newcomers, to me, that means four people, I think. And I hope I'm not forgetting about anyone. And I'm looking at the roster right now as we speak. Okay, I guess you could technically say five people. So who I'm talking about is Breanna Stewart, Courtney Vandersloot, Jonquel Jones, Kayla Thornton, and Niara Sabally. That's sort of who we're talking about when we say newcomers.
Right.
Breanna Stewart is putting up an MVP season. I mean, I do not think it can be more or less anything than that. If you look at what she's doing this year, I do have the stats right here. So, okay, 22 points per game. Let's see. Oh, she's almost at a double-double. Oh, man, she's averaging 9.8 rebounds per game, 4.1 assists.
Point Stewie has become a bigger and bigger thing. No question about it. I mean, even the way to kind of summarize it to me is Stewie's done everything she's done throughout her career, but she's doing it a little bit better in a bigger, more pressurized atmosphere.
Yes.
That's the way I look at it.
Oh my God, yes. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me is I think this team is still learning about how to play around Breanna Stewart because it's very clear, and I say this to almost everyone, in that as someone who has covered this team since 2019, I am not used to a player like Breanna Stewart. I am not used to covering someone like her, someone who, God, like I'm usually someone who doesn't speak in absolutes, but there's not a lot that she can't do on the basketball court. She does not have a lot of weaknesses on the basketball court. And it's one thing to be covering the league more broadly and you sort of understand who she is and what she does. It's another thing to be watching it with your own eyes in the arena. And that's something that has really opened my eyes. I think when it comes to the other newcomers, Courtney Vandersloot, obviously, she got an all-star nod. She's leading the league in assists. She's doing sort of, I don't want to say exactly, but she's doing a lot of what the Liberty thought she would do, which is, okay, she's going to be someone to, I guess, organize the offense and make things a little bit easier for Sabrina Ionescu, which I think she has. Although if you look at the shooting splits, they're maybe not where you'd want them to be. So she's shooting.
It's also a relatively small sample. I mean, field goal percentage, she's right at her career mark of 44%.
Okay.
The threes are down a little. It's just I'm struggling to take seriously a 43 shot sample over 15 games. That's kind of where I'm at with that, because it's one of these things where she made 3 or 4 more. We're talking about her right in line with her career log.
That I'm glad that I'm talking to someone who knows these stats much better than I do. But I think for Courtney Vandersloot, and I think it goes back to what Olaf Lang told me a bunch of weeks ago, which is she can learn what not many people can learn in a week, in that her just ability to absorb and execute is on just such a higher level than so many other players in this league. And it's showing. It really is showing. When it comes to
I just want to frame it with Jonquel Jones before we go to it. I point is well taken to me that Courtney Vandersloot is very much Courtney Vandersloot as far as that goes. And that is not surprising to me. I did want to add one note on Breanna Stewart. Breanna Stewart, on top of doing everything she does, is just as impressive as ever when it comes to not turning the ball over. She is somehow on her 3rd straight season with single-digit turnover percentage. It just boggles the mind with her at the center of people's scouting reports. Like you said, she's going to be one of the handful of players that we tell our grandchildren we covered someday. It's that level of player where you just talk about a generational talent. I do want to talk about Jonquel Jones to just frame it where a lot of the conversation is about disappointment. And I guess my sort of counter is JJ was telling us both in the offseason, it's about efficiency rather than numbers. And she's been a 50, 40, 80 player so far. I mean, that just has to count for something.
But not just that. I mean, I think we have to give her a little bit of grace in that
Mhm.
I think she told a bunch of us after a game that this foot injury she had might have been the first injury that she's endured since maybe high school. So she has been very durable for a lot of her basketball career.
Mhm.
And, it would be one thing if she was sort of reacclimating into a system she knew, but it's sort of like the double whammy. It's like, okay, she's reacclimating from an injury, but then it's a completely different system with completely different players and a completely different coaching staff.
Yeah.
And so I think when you zoom out a little bit, you think, oh, okay, this makes sense. This makes a lot of sense. Um, I also happen to think that in the past few games, and I alluded to this in my piece, you know, she is a very good rim protector in this league.
Mhm.
And it was very much so on display against the Connecticut Sun. I mean, the JJ we saw on Tuesday, the 27th? Yes, June
Mhm.
27th was very much so the MVP JJ. I remember asking Sandy Brondello, I said, "So what did you learn about JJ after this game?" And she goes, "I didn't learn a thing. This is who JJ is. This is exactly the player that we traded for."
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it, and we're going to get into that because when it comes to both what needs to change and also reasonable expectations for where the team is headed, it's very hard to see anyone who is overperforming, and so that strikes me again as a potential much higher ceiling. But first, very excited to be able to talk to you guys about FanDuel. You can take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Now that's 200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to over under to who you think is going to hit the first home run of a game. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no other place or no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit fanduel.com/locked on. That's fanduel.com/LOCKEDON to get up to $200 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. So when we think about these teams, part of it for me is all right, we're evaluating what they've been so far, but part of it is evaluating what they're going to be. And you alluded to it as it relates to Jonquel Jones, which is that she's going to get only more comfortable in the system. And there's reason to believe only healthier. We can't guarantee there aren't further injuries, but certainly the injury that she is coming back from is something she's navigating and getting better and better at. Courtney Vandersloot, same basic idea that she's getting more and more comfortable around her teammates. Breanna Stewart has already been performing, as you pointed out, at an MVP level. Sabrina Ionescu is getting more and more shots. And I remember a conversation you and I had in press row. Betnijah Laney got off to a slow start shooting. And the point that we were both saying is that you can't be that open and be as good as Betnijah Laney is without turning into an elite shooter. And you're seeing that more and more from her as that option. So when we think about it and kind of framing it as what needs to change, is that kind of overstating it? Isn't what needs to change just the passage of time, which is inexorable and guaranteed?
I think there's some things that need to change, and I think that's on the defensive end, really. And
Mhm.
I think that the game against the Las Vegas Aces really put that out on blast. And I will never forget this exchange I had with Sandy Brondello post game, where she was asked a previous question and she sort of said, "Yeah, we were very much so exposed." And so then I took that one phrase and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have her tell me exactly what she thought was exposed about the team. Have it, have her put it in her own words. And so I said, so what was exposed exactly tonight? And she said, you could tell me, Jackie. It's not a question for Einstein. And then I said, no, but I want you to tell me. And so then she calmed down and was like, yeah, I mean, our one-on-one defense, they really expose that, and how that's something that, isn't one of our main strengths. And based on how this roster was constructed, we knew that. But we also knew, okay, there are players, guard wing players on this team that are really good defenders that can fill in those gaps. And they have a post unit that also defends very well. When you think of Jonquel Jones and Breanna Stewart, and when you think about those two sort of roaming the paint and them being able to rotate and move to spots to make sure that driving lanes are not as easy for Kelsey Plum. In case Sabrina Ionescu, who for her, defense is very much so a work in progress, but it seems very clear to me that she cares about this. It's not like she does not care about it. There obviously is a situation on the Phoenix Mercury where there is a player there who clearly does not value that side of the ball, and it gets exposed night after night. Right. That's not the case with Sabrina Ionescu. It's that it's a little harder for her because of, how her physique is and how she plays. And Sandy Brondello's approach to that is, they're going to keep working on it. They're going to keep giving her the tools that she needs to be successful. And she's going to be able to learn from someone like Courtney Vandersloot, who over time became a better defender. And for Courtney Vandersloot, sure, she's quicker and she comes off screens a bit quicker. But a lot of Courtney Vandersloot's defense is really just being able to read situations with how she thinks the game. Right. And so if we know anything about Sabrina Ionescu, that is also another one of her strengths, how she sees the floor.
And all of that is well taken. But to me, there's almost this compound problem where, all right, if you're going to have some guards who are struggling with one-on-one defending, how do you make up for that? And you make up for it with rim protection. I mean, you alluded to the Phoenix Mercury. And again, the reason why it hasn't mattered as much that Diana Taurasi on the defensive side of the ball has not always been the most committed is that they have had Brittany Griner in the paint for the large portion of the last decade of Diana Taurasi's career. And so when I look at this Liberty team, I just wonder how much, there are 4 players with block percentages north of 3. And 2 of them are JJ and Breanna Stewart. And the other 2 are Han Shu, who's not here right now, and Stephanie Golson, who's injured. And how much does it matter that the Liberty get those 2 back in order to be able to shore this up?
So, oh man. So Han Shu, I will clarify, she is back in the United States right now. She left following her MVP performance at the Asia Cup. I believe it was on Monday. And so she's back in the States. But as we know, it is a 14-hour time difference from here in New York to Sydney, Australia. That is that is a lot. So the Liberty have smartly taken the approach of, okay, we're not going to force Han back into it without even a full practice. They had a shoot around this morning, but they will most likely have a full practice on Friday prior to their game against the Storm at home. And to be quite honest, I think the Storm would be a pretty good opportunity for Han, especially thinking about who the Storm have been playing and who they haven't been playing and some of those size mismatches. Mercedes Russell has been benched in favor of Joyner Holmes, and I believe Dulcie, she has a very long name, which I do not want to mispronounce. She's a rookie. Her name will come to me, but the point is the size that the Storm have in 6'7" Mercedes Russell isn't always being used.
Right.
So when it comes to integrating Honshu, following this quite impressive Asia Cup performance, which I will give an asterisk to, in that, and I've asked Sandy Brondello about this, Team Australia sends what is essentially their B team to the Asia Cup, because and what I mean by that is they send a younger group of opals that are, playing in the WBL, but maybe aren't at a WNBA level yet. And so basically the opals put their AAA group out to the Asia Cup. The Chinese national team decided, no, we need our senior team to be here because this is going to be one of our main opportunities to qualify for the Olympics.
Sure.
And so China won the Asia Cup. Initially, the Chinese players in the WNBA initially were going to stay throughout the season, but then there was a change, and here we are. Obviously, on the Washington Mystics, you have Lee Meng, who, right as she was getting used to the Mystic system, she had to go to Sydney, Australia. It was, oh my God, it was like Murphy's Law.
Yes,
but,
no doubt. And so just to kind of jump in and corral this one, we're at a point, I think, where Seattle gives them an opportunity, but more generally, there's a different question, which is Honshu has played 18 minutes all year. And what we need to find out is, how does Honshu fit here in this rotation? And you have written about the fact that with Steph Tolson out, there's an opportunity for her to do that. Do you see that happening, or do you see it being more a question of Niara Sabally taking up more of what had been Steph Tolson's minutes?
Okay, so to be quite honest, we've seen that experiment and it has not gone well. Niara Sabally, who, let me just say, at moments has looked really good. So good that our own M. Adler was like, hey, she's on my all-rookie team right now. And to be quite honest, before the 3-game stretch against the 3 best teams in the league, or 3 best opponents in the league, really, I thought, okay, all right, Niara is going to slide into that role. She had a lot of issues, not only on communicating on defensive coverages, which, mind you, defense isn't Han's strength either.
But it's also a difficult thing for a rookie.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing for a rookie. And also just her offense seemed a little hesitant. And against some of the best players in this league, that was bound to happen. She was bound to sort of come back down to earth. And this is not me taking a shot at Niara Sabally at all, but this is me sort of saying Honshu has a skill set that at some points isn't guardable. Honshu is a player who could shoot over Shakira Austin. I mean, mind you, Shakira Austin is out for a few weeks now, but in that Washington game,
makes it easier, but she could do it anyway.
Yes.
She can do it over anybody. Honshu, I mean, let's be clear about it. Honshu with her length, that not only allows her to shoot over people, but it also allows her to make up for some of her defensive lapses, but simply by being able to block shots. So you can recover late and still be able to reach. I do also, by the way, just want to talk about very briefly, the player you mentioned is Dulcie Fancom-Mengiadu, and I want to make sure her name doesn't go unspoken. I know if I had known you were going there, I would have had that ahead of time, but wanted to make sure that it's all good. I want to make sure we had that here in the podcast as well. But yes, to your point, there are both of those things. Honshu, by virtue of being able to make up for those defensive limitations at times, that is significant. It's not a shot at Niara to talk about the fact, I bet Niara would be the first to tell you, that as a rookie in the WNBA is a defensive adjustment period that just is something that needs to be figured out, to be navigated. And just, again, that Honshu skill set, we've talked about it, we've mentioned it. To me, this is just, my observation, Honshu needs to be playing more. And so I'm very eager to see that happen. It sounds to me like what you're saying is that she should get that opportunity. That's your impression anyways. We go into the week ahead.
Yes, absolutely. Once she gets on this time zone, that is the idea. And
Okay.
and what the Liberty really want to do is they want to be able to get comfortable throwing at opponents as many different lineups and as many different looks as possible. And so you can't do that unless you try it. And so what I expect to see is the coaching staff get a little bit more creative, especially in games when they can.
Mhm.
And if there are leads that are, let's say, 15 to 20 points, if the
Mhm.
Liberty are in that range, there is no reason in the third quarter, even in the second quarter, to try to change things up a bit. Because I can say that it is my understanding that inside the Liberty, this roster was constructed. I mean, I feel very confident in saying that it is the most talented roster in the league from 1 through 11,
Mhm.
just based on talent and ability.
Well,
And there have
1
been,
through 11. I mean, that's a critical because you just have to look at what Las Vegas is doing, and what they're doing is not just best in the league, it's historic. I mean, to have a net rating of 19.5. But 1 through 11 is the critical part, and where the Liberty make up that gap, to your point, is in depth in what they're able to do.
yes, and it has been noticeable, and against Las Vegas, it was noticeable that some of the lack of creativity and a lack of trying things out put the Liberty in a bind. Listen, in addition to the fact that they were coming off a 12 to 13 hour travel to
True.
get to Las Vegas, they just played 2 games against the best in the league, and then they were changing time zones. I mean, that puts a caveat into it as well. But I do think being able to put Han Shu on the floor and for her to be able to shoot over Kia Stokes, and Kia Stokes won't be able to do anything about it, or to bring in Jocelyn Willoughby to try to put a body and crowd Chelsea Gray. Those are options that I can say confidently that this team is thinking about.
Can't wait to see it. And that's before you even get to the jumbo lineup. I want to see Han Shu with JJ and Stewie. I'm really curious to see it. I say that not just from an overall basketball observer perspective. I think that's a fascinating lineup to put out there. But boy, there are some real advantages to it that are going to be, I think, self-evident. I'm fascinated to see if it happens. But we are out of time. It is always great to chat with you, Jackie Powell. If you are listening and not watching us on YouTube, follow Jackie on Twitter at ClassicJPow, ClassicJPOW. Follow her on Instagram because that seems like a little bit more of a stable platform as well. We will be back with you tomorrow, as we are 6 days a week here on Locked On Women's Basketball. Delighted you were with us as always. Until next time, have a wonderful Wednesday.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.